Hey guys, it's Nicole Eaton with the Rock Your Soul book and podcast, where we talk about how to hack your mindset, grow your intuition, and live your best life. You can support this podcast by subscribing, leaving a positive review, and screenshot and sharing on social media. Welcome back to another episode of the Rock Your Soul podcast. I'm your host, Nicole Eaton, author of the book Rock Your Soul, The Down to Earth Guide to Mastering Your Mind, available on Amazon and Soul Therapist. And today we are going to do just a random day. I'm feeling random today, and I was trying to narrow down a topic for y'all, and I felt like, you know what? There's so much on my heart today that I just want to talk about all of it. So we're going to open this up and see where it goes and see where it leads. But I think that the energy right now is kind of crazy. It's a little bananas. So if you've been feeling unsettled, if you've been feeling the intensity, if you've been feeling like things are happening that are strange or odd, you're not alone. And I always like to talk about energy because I think nobody talks about it unless you're in the world of energy. It's not talked about, and it is so common that a mass quantity of people at a time will feel chaotic, will feel stressed out, will feel overwhelmed, will feel anxious. I know this past weekend I had very bad physical anxiety. I am not an anxious person, but I felt like my heart was beating out of my chest. Like, it took a minute to catch my breath, and my daughter came to me later that day and she was like, "I think something's wrong with me. Like, I'm breathing weird." I'm like, "What do you mean you're breathing weird?" And she was like, I just feel like I have to keep going like this sometimes." And I'm like, okay, so she's feeling that physical anxiety too. So if you are energetically sensitive, which most people are, you might have been feeling anxiety symptoms that are physical. You might have been feeling overwhelmed. You might have been feeling stressed out. You might have been feeling lost, like, what the hell is my next step? So I just want to acknowledge this for a couple of reasons because I'm not into playing victimhood. We don't play victim to the energy and we don't play victim to ourselves. But it is helpful to recognize that maybe some of that energy wasn't yours. Maybe you don't have to figure out why you feel lost. Maybe you don't have to figure out what you're anxious about. The day passed, the next day was totally fine. So for me and my daughter, so it doesn't have to mean something. And I think that's the big thing about energy that I want people to understand is that sometimes we receive energy not because it means something or we're in danger or there's something we need to worry about, but because we're near it, because we're part of a collective energy field, because we're around somebody who's chaotic. So I'm not saying that all energy and emotions that you experience are someone else's or related to the collective energy, but I am saying that consider when you're feeling something that really came out of the blue, that doesn't really make sense in your day. If you're feeling like suddenly you're really anxious and you weren't before that moment, you were totally fine, you've had a decent day, the energy is probably not yours. And so we can kind of go into the energy and just say, hey, what is this? And we can do this thing when we use our intuition and when we're playing with energy. It's kind of like a question and then we wait for a response. So we might go into the energy and say, I don't know what this is. Is this even mine? And when we pose that question, our body is always responding. If you've listened to my podcast, you know that our body is always religiously responding to our questions, our thoughts, our feelings. So it's either expanding and opening and filling our energy with love, or it's shutting down. So when we pose a question for our energy field of, hey, is this even mine? And it's not, you'll know. It'll feel a specific way. It'll feel different. It'll feel like sometimes it maybe even lightens up and kind of shifts out. Or maybe it's like, oh, okay, that's not mine. I was feeling totally fine today. So it's important to just ask yourself if you're somebody who's emotional. I've had a lot of my empaths report feeling super emotionally unstable this month. We are in eclipse season. We've just ended eclipse season. We're still in the aftermath. We're in Venus retrograde. There's a lot of astrological bullshit that's doing good things for you. So I'm not going to say, "Oh, we're all just in chaos and it's fine and it's just we just got to get through it." We do have to get through it, but when I people talk about retrograde, when people talk about Venus retrograde, when people talk about eclipse season, when people talk about these astrological events, the important thing to note is that even when there's like chaos astrologically or there's energy that's being stirred up in the collective that feels unpleasant, it's a lot of times clearing out stuff to make way for a new version of you. And if you can really look at it like that, of like, okay, I'm going through a challenging time or a challenging energy, or things just feel hard this week, I want you to stop and think about the fact that it's probably clearing out some old thoughts, some old fears. And so when those things come to the surface, or are energetically triggered to come to the surface, of like, what are you actually fucking afraid of? Who would you be if you weren't afraid? Like, what type of person would you be? How different would that be if you weren't afraid? I was thinking about that the other day, of like, if if you just deeply, fully believed in yourself, like, what would that look like action wise? How would that be different? And I just think it's part of what this energy right now is doing, is clearing out those fears, asking you if you need them. Do you still need those fears from when you were, a kid and standing on stage and people made fun of you? Do you still need to feel that way about public speaking every time you do it? Do you still need to be anxious or nervous? Do you still need to play it small because that's what you're used to? This is the energy questioning you, of like, are you going to step up in your life? Are you going to shift out of your bullshit? If you don't follow Heather Mayo's podcast, I think it's called the Magic Mind Podcast. I'll have to look at that. But if you don't follow Heather Mayo, follow her. She's amazing. And if you don't listen to her podcast, go listen to it, subscribe to it. It's amazing. She did an episode called The Lies We Tell Ourselves. And it was just so good, and so much about your bullshit. And so this energy is triggering all the lies we've been telling ourselves. Truth is subjective. Like, that's the interesting part about life, is we're like, "Oh, I'm not this, or I'm not that, or I'm ugly, or I'm not successful, or I'm not wealthy enough, or I'm not." All those things that we're constantly like comparing ourselves to are subjective measurements. And the only person who makes up those measurements is us. Every single person makes up their own measurements of what success is. For some people, success is a happy family life. For some, success is a big house and a nice car. For some, success means climbing up the corporate ladder. For some, success means surviving a hard time. For some, success means, like, at the end of the day, this energy is asking us to really assess, like, what does it all mean to you? What are your measuring sticks of how you're doing in your life? And if we really break those down, are you holding your measuring stick and your personal measuring stick at a way higher level than everybody else around you? Because I feel like that's true for a lot of people, is we're like, it's fine if they do it. It's not fine if I do it. It's fine if they make this change in their life. It's not fine if I make this change in my life. We're walking contradictions at all times, and it's important for us to like assess what we're measuring ourselves up against. Like, this clearing is asking you to step the fuck up. So if we're stepping up, we have to start to ask ourselves what that measuring stick is. What does it mean to be worthy? What does it mean to be beautiful? What does it actually fucking mean to be successful? And then we have to ask ourselves if that's even a good measuring stick. It's so funny because when I work with clients for long periods of time, and with soul therapy, I do. Soul therapy, I work with people weekly, monthly, biweekly, and it's amazing the success that occurs in small increments over time for people. The changes they made of, okay, so just, thinking off the top of my head, I had a client who canceled her Thanksgiving because she was feeling overwhelmed with hosting a million people who were coming from all over that she didn't want to host in the first place, that somebody had kind of guilted or asked her to do. And so she ended up saying, "No, this is just too much for me." That alone, that right there, that one small decision was a massive change from the people pleaser that I met 2 years ago when we first started working together. That one change and the understanding of why, and the ability to do it in a guilt-free way, that was massive. So the changes that we think about making, when we're making changes, a lot of times we're like, "Oh, I see a change as changing a job, or I see a change as leaving a relationship, or I see a change as getting a new house or moving locations or going back to school." Changes are big like that, but the real freaking changes are the small ways you interact and react with people daily. If you can change those, you can change your entire inner world, which in turn will change your entire external world. If you can look at something and say, I'm not doing that the same way I used to do that. I'm not letting myself get used by you. I'm not letting myself get run over and doormatted like I used to. I'm not accepting this into my life anymore. And so when we start to make different changes and we start to change our measuring sticks of what makes me successful, what makes me feel good, what makes me feel most like myself, and we start to ask ourselves those questions of like, what are small daily changes? And maybe that's setting boundaries. Maybe that's calling yourself out on your bullshit. Maybe that's responding rather than reacting. Maybe it's not giving into the urge to drink alcohol when you feel uncomfortable. All of these little things in a basic tiny change of not giving into an urge to do something that you know is not going to help you is huge. That is a bigger deal than moving houses. That is a bigger deal than changing jobs, and we underestimate it. And that's what this energy is here to do, is to shake stuff up so that we stop responding to life, because when we start being intentional about not being automated, and what I mean by that is that when we start to be intentional about our lives instead of just doing the same thing over and over again, that's where we start to create rather than respond. And when we're no longer responding to our life, when we're no longer just existing in it, responding to it, managing it, we're creating it. And so when we start to do anything differently, and it doesn't have to be a big change, and sometimes we're not ready for the big change. Sometimes the big change is overwhelming. Sometimes the big change is too much for right now, and that's okay. So we can start with small decisions, small dedications to ourselves. Small moments where we're asking for peace, small moments where we're saying no, small moments where we're committing to ourselves daily, even if you don't want to. Small moments where we're choosing to respond rather than react, where we're choosing to take a deep breath and walk away, where we're choosing to set up a habit of small 5 to 10 minute meditations a day. Anything where you're committing to yourself or responding differently is the basis of a massive change. That's where we get the confidence to make those bigger choices and to feel good, because sometimes people shift jobs and stick with their bullshit, you know? Sometimes people move across the country and are still the same person they were in the small town back home. You can take your bullshit with you, or you can face it, and that will change everything, and that will open up opportunities, and that will bring in the right people. And this is what that energy is asking you to do. It's asking you to assess. It's asking you to look at what you're doing in your day-to-day life. The other thing that was coming up in somebody had posted it in my group. I had somebody post in my group, I'm having a really, really hard time focusing. A couple things coming into winter. A, chaotic energy, right? When we're having trouble focusing, it can be a handful of things. It doesn't always mean you have ADD or ADHD. And the one thing I will say is, like, I'm on TikTok and I've been stuck on ADHD TikTok, and I'm like, dude, do I have ADD? I don't know, and part of me is like, maybe, but also part of me is like, okay, no, because when I manage my energy, when I get some vitamin D and when I ground my energy, I can focus. When I'm balancing my body with the right foods, I can focus. So I want you to ask yourself those questions of, is this focus something, like a lot of people resort to medical and they need a prescription. And I want you to ask yourself, if I do things that feel good to me and take good care of myself, do I still have this issue? I am all for taking care of the things that actually need to be taken care of. If you feel like, man, I've done everything in my power, I've cleaned up my eating, I've worked out, I've meditated or worked towards meditation, I'm intentional about whatever, and I'm still struggling with this, definitely seek help. But I want you to like exhaust all the holistic options before you result to any prescription for pretty much anything. That is my holistic advice to you, is to exhaust all of the options of making sure you're being your best self and see if the problem still persists. Also, cut out toxic people, because that'll do it too. Guys, just as like side note on toxic relationships and toxicity, when you have somebody or something that's massively toxic in your life and you don't deal with it, and especially if it's a toxic relationship, I had this conversation with a client yesterday. Um, when we have toxicity, especially words unsaid, especially if we feel like we're walking on eggshells around somebody or we can't speak our truth, uh, when we start to store that energy, it becomes disease, dis-ease, Diesease. If we break that word apart, dis-ease, when we're uncomfortable, when things are toxic, it will create disease in our body. And that might look like getting sick a lot. That might look like actually developing a health condition. That might look like chronic headaches. When we're not taking care of ourselves and we're not being authentically true to ourselves, and we're in a relationship or situation, whether it's work or family or a actual romantic relationship or even a friendship that's toxic, that toxicity will store in your body. And when it stores in your body, it will start causing health concerns. So if you're dealing with health concerns, double check that you're not around any assholes. Double check you're not around somebody who makes you feel small and insecure and insignificant. And double check that all these things aren't being produced from an external source onto you. And then take care of yourself, like just double check that. Like, let's run through our life in that following way, right? If we run through our life of like something's wrong with me and double check, okay, am I eating well? Am I getting enough sleep? Am I drinking enough water? Am I grounding my energy and taking care of my energy? Am I creating time for myself? And am I surrounded by people who are awesome or people who are draining the shit out of me? Am I surrounded by people who are incredible or am I surrounded by people who make me second guess myself or criticize me every 5 minutes? I don't talk about toxic relationships for as much as it comes up in sessions, but we need to start talking about it. We need to start talking about releasing things that aren't good for you. We need to start demanding more for your life and for yourself. We are heading into a brand new year. I know we haven't even done Christmas yet, but I'm not afraid to like talk about it. Like, let's talk about it. Let's have that conversation of like, who's around you? Are they making you better? Are they making you worse? Are you walking on eggshells around anybody in your life? Do they need to be there still? Your focus really is caught in this energy right now. So it's important for you to ground and protect your energy, whether that's a meditation, whether that's Palo Santo, whether that's doing a visualization, being outside, putting your feet on the earth, whatever you can do. I also have a grounding mat. I don't know if I'm sure they sell them. You can look for a grounding mat. It's just the frequency waves of grounding energy. And so sometimes if I'm feeling really flighty or like I can't remember anything, I'll go and use that just because it will allow me to just be more in my body to be able to do the work I do. Another thing, as we're heading into winter, vitamin D. I live where it's sunshine and I still take almost 10,000 IUs of vitamin D. I'm like severely deficient in vitamin D. In general, I always have been. And I thought moving in sunshine would help. And I still am, for some reason, just not able to allocate that in my body properly. So we are intentionally taking care of her. Take your vitamins, drink your water, get your sunlight, be a plant. It's all good. Like, we have to just start being really intentional about holistic healthcare within ourselves. Like, you're worth taking that time for. You're worth assessing your life. Like, what a beautiful, perfect time to start assessing what's going on for you. And this energy, again, this energy is not for nothing. It is absolutely intended for you to clear the way to your best self. It's getting rid of the bullshit. It's asking you to get rid of your fears. It's asking you to confront them. The other thing I was thinking about, I was thinking a lot about manifestation, and a lot of times we can get into the habit of just going through the motions of manifesting. And I want to do a whole episode on receiving. And when we're going through the motions of manifestation and we're not feeling it, it's probably not working. So I just wanted to throw out a reminder to everybody who's manifesting. What if we could envision that for you? What would it look like? Who would you have to be? How would that feel to be somebody who's more confident, to be somebody who's stronger, to be somebody who's more decisive, to be somebody who's more consistent? What would that feel like in your body? Where would you feel that in your body? We can get really physical when we're manifesting if we can bring that energy into our body. Because again, our brain doesn't know what's real and what's perceived. So if I believe that I'm a confident whatever business owner, blah blah blah, if I believe I'm a great mom, if I believe, like, if I start to believe and embody this energy, my body is going to assume that that is the case. And that's cool. Like, that's the cool thing our brain does, is that as much as we can create panic attacks and anxiety and our body think that we need to go into fight and flight mode, We can also create confidence in the energy of achievement and success, and our body also believe that. And again, anything we sell our body and brain, like, we're choosing. So just as you're getting into this energy, getting out of this energy, moving through it, just remind yourself to feel it and also create room to receive. Make sure you're making space to receive, and that can be as simple as like clearing out the clutter in your space. Over the weekend, my daughter, we do like a Christmas clean out because the kids are very well spoiled by their relatives and us probably, but we did a Christmas clean out of my daughter's room, and she loves stuff. Like, she's got 9,000 stuffed animals. She had a backpack full of acorns, which is still really funny to me. But she just likes to save stuff. She's very sentimental in that way, and it's harder for me because I'm not. And so we have to find common ground between the two of us of what we can keep and in treasure and what we can create, space for. And so she was pretty reluctant through the whole thing of just, I really would like to keep this. And so we really talked about it and talked about what she was using daily and what she would like to, what things are important to her. And when we got done, she was a little bummed out and sad to let go of some of her things. But later in the day, she was up in her room and she was like, Mommy, my room feels so good. My room feels so good. And now I have place for things for that I get for Christmas. I have a bunch of spots open for anything I can get for Christmas. I'm like, oh, Kylie, you're in the energy of receiving when you create space for something that you desire more than what you had. And so I want you to put yourself in the energy, whether it's the Christmas spirit or not. I want you to put yourself in the energy of receiving. What does that look like? What does that feel like? What would it be like to receive? Do you have space in your life for something new, or are you still clinging to something old? So this is your sign to use this energy wisely, to look at what it's doing for you, not to you. What is it clearing space for? And you can clear space alongside of it. You can make those little changes, those little commitments to yourself. You can respond rather than react. You can be more intentional about making sure you're holistically taken care of, whether that's drinking your water, eating your food that fuels you. It's all important. I'm thinking of you guys this holiday season next week with Heather Mayo. We are going to talk about holidays and getting through the holidays. So I am sending you all my love. I'm sending you all the light. Make sure you grab my book on Amazon, Rock Your Soul, The Down to Earth Guide to Master Your Mind. I have a couple more spots in December, and then we're booking into January 2022. And 222 is my lucky number. I've got it tattooed on my arm, and I think it's going to be one hell of a good year. So I'm setting all of the intentions that we all wake up on our intended ideal timeline and our intended ideal body and our intended ideal mindset with the ideal intended people around us that are meant for us to help us reach our best selves and our biggest goals. All right, y'all. Make sure to connect with me on Instagram, NicoleEaton.xo. Make sure to join the Facebook group, which is facebook.com/group/Rock Your Soul Clarity. I love you all. And I'm, again, so grateful for you to just have all of your support, all of your love. Leaving a review always is the best thing you can do for me. And subscribing always helps. Sharing on your social media. I appreciate it all. All right, y'all. Bye. Thank you so much for listening to the Rock Your Soul book and podcast. Take a moment to book a one-on-one session with me or purchase my trainings at NicoleEaton.com. Join the Rock Your Soul Facebook group or follow me on Instagram at NicoleEaton.xo. And if you loved this podcast, don't forget to share it. Thank you.